Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I would now like to call the May 7th, 2024 Longmont City Council study session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel, also at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch, or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. May I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Christ.
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo Fehring.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember McCoy.
Present.
Councilmember Aaron Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
First. Make sure everyone knows.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start with our agenda, I have a statement that I would like to read. I'm going to start this meeting tonight to thank all of you for your passion and activism regarding the Israel and Palestine conflict. I understand why some of you are unhappy that Council did not pass a resolution asking for a ceasefire and compassionate aid. Your Council was elected to make Council policy concerning the city of Longmont. There are always two or more sides to a conflict. Our residents come from many parts of the world where wars are being fought, representing many sides and viewpoints. As a council, we must be impartial, not making resolutions or proclamations pertaining to
Genocide, you should not be impartial. You should pick a side. Either you're for genocide or you're not. Order. You should be ashamed. All of you have blood on your hands. Don't touch me your hands.
I am going to give you one more time, and then we will recess. Everybody out and recess.
I'm not a settler. I'm indigenous.
Before I finish my statement, I want to say that any disruption of this meeting, it is a business meeting, any disruption, loud shouting we will give you one warning, we're going to recess. Third warning, we're adjourning the meeting. Civil discourse. So I'm going to finish my speech. So here we go. Your council was elected to make policy concerning the city of Longmont. There are always two or more sides of conflict. Our residents come from many parts of the world where wars are being fought, representing many sides and viewpoints. As a council, we must be impartial, not making resolutions or proclamations pertaining to only one side of the conflict. That in no way means that when we take off the council hats individually, we can't sit down with you and express our personal views. Children are always the victims of international conflicts, many times resulting in all-out war. To say that we do not care or should be ashamed that we aren't making a resolution or a proclamation is unfair. Whether it's Israel, Yemen, Africa, through wars, or the United States, where children are victims of mass shootings, I can assure you that not one of your council members aren't saddened and brought to tears by these horrendous acts. Hopefully the ceasefire that Hamas has accepted and Israel is leaning toward accepting will be honored. Thank you for listening to me. And with that, I will move on to the agenda and read the following. Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Members of the audience shall refrain from disruptive, vulgar, or abusive language, applause, heckling, or other actions that interfere with the orderly function of this council. The chair may recess or call to adjourn the meeting after 3 attempts to maintain the orderly function of the council are ignored. So now we are on motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas, and I see that Councilor Martin is in the queue.
Yes, this is really just a point of order. I would like to remind the mayor that she voted in favor of a resolution for social equity in January of 2017, and that she voted for a resolution begging the state and national legislature for firearm safety, and in, well, whatever year it was triggered by the Parkland and Texas shootings. And there was a lot of division in Longmont about both of those resolutions, but the council voted for it anyway. So I really don't like to let an inaccurate statement like the mayor's stand. Thanks.
I'm sorry, but that was within our country, and it pertained to what was going to be happening in our city, and that is part of our duty. It was also mentioned in the paper that I had a proclamation on nuclear proliferation, and that was a global proclamation, not intended for one specific country, one specific war. If we had a proclamation or a resolution stating that council was in favor of banning or having ceasefires worldwide because we believe that children and people need to be protected against any type of conflicts or wars, that would be different. It wouldn't be targeted for one thing, and we cannot take a position on one certain action by one certain side of a conflict. So, once again, are there any agenda items that councilors would like to add to future agendas? Seeing no one, now I lost my place. We are going directly to public invited to be heard. Remember, this is the first one is for Longmont residents only. Please state your name and address. And you have 3 minutes. The first one on the list is Shaquille Dalal.
Shaquille Dalal, 219 Francis Street. Can we get the time? There's no other way to tell how much time we have left unless it's on that TV.
We're having IT problems.
Okay. Well, I'll do my best then. Mayor and members of council, I'm here regarding item 6B. The cost of housing is a choice. Item 6B is a choice of whether or not to restrict the construction of residential properties in a zone 5,000 feet long and 1,250 feet wide from the end of the airport runway. I believe that you should not make this choice, and as far as I can tell, the FAA does not require you to make this choice. Quoting the first of two sentences that comprise the entirety of Grant Assurance number 21, it, meaning the city of Longmont, will take appropriate action to the extent reasonable, including the adoption of zoning laws to restrict the use of land adjacent to or in the immediate vicinity of the airport to activities and purposes compatible with normal airport operations, including the landing and takeoff of aircraft. The FAA also makes it clear that it has no jurisdiction over local land use. This is a negotiation. So the question is, what is the FAA's definition of compatibility, and what are the reasonable measures that we think that we should take? My opinion is that the course of action being proposed to you is unreasonable and has no relationship to the FAA's actual requirements. Because of the rules governing quasi-judicial communications, I am prohibited from sharing with you the information I have about the number of residential units that would be prevented from being built by the ordinance and on the parcels that are covered by the putative Zone B. But I would like to take this opportunity to describe the FAA's compatibility requirements to you. In the advisory circular attached to the council communication, the FAA defines compatibility using 6 criteria in section 2.2, which is page 36 of your council communication. These criteria govern everything from Vance Brand to Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, which is one of the world's busiest airports and is surrounded on all sides by residential uses closer than what would be allowed in Longmont under this change. Do we think that Vance Brand is less compatible with residential uses than O'Hare? Criteria 1, noise. As this council is aware from the many noise studies that have been performed, the airport does not meet the threshold for noise incompatibility with residential development pursuant to Chapter 14 CFR Part 150. Airspace. The proposed developments have received letters of no hazard from the FAA. Visual obstructions. There are no planned visual obstructions as defined in the circular. Wildlife and birds. Don't encourage more wildlife near the airport. Check. Runway protection zones. The dimensions of runway protection zones are designated in FAA Circular 150-5313, Table 2-4. For the level of service at the Vance Brand Airport, the appropriate length of the runway protection zone is 1,000 feet. This zone already exists, and no one is planning to build anything there. Density. The FAA is scared of public noise complaints and would prefer the cities minimize the number of people who live near the airport. This is not a requirement. Finally, I would like to point to Section 2.3 of the FAA communication. Quote, it will be important for specific communities to tailor their use of this information to their specific needs. The proposed amendments in item 6B are lifted directly from Appendix D of the FAA Advisory Circular. The land use restrictions in that appendix are not FAA requirements. They are an example from one place that might not be very much like Longmont and all, and as such may not be appropriate for us without tailoring. So here's my question. If the cost of housing is a choice, is this a good choice? Thank you.
Thank you, Shaquille. Perfect. Marie Nicholson Hutt. And don't forget your address, please. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Longmont City Council. Good evening, Mayor. I'm Marie Nicholson Hutt, 1193 Fall River Circle resident of Longmont for 16 years. I'm a single mother of 3 kids, Mahnor 16, Abdullah 14, and Khadijah 3 years old. I work for the city of Longmont as a civil engineer in the development review. I converted to Islam 20 years ago while at the United States Air Force Academy. I've been part of the Colorado Muslim community since my conversion in 2004. I've served in the active duty Air Force and was released from service in 2016. I love Longmont and this community. Yes, I occasionally am harassed for being visibly Muslim here, but 95% of the time I'm embraced by this community. And moreover, my family is safe, has a roof over their heads, no fear of being bombed, no fear of hunger or thirst, unlike our Palestinian brothers and sisters who have only fear. I wanted to call on the City Council to recognize the power that you have and to respectfully request that you pass a resolution for immediate ceasefire in Palestine and the release of all hostages. The claim that because we are a municipality, we cannot engage in international affairs is wrong. For the first time in history, a majority of people live in cities in the United States. 4 out of 5 people live in cities. They are the building blocks of our country, states, and federal government. Longmont Sister Cities Association mission is to strengthen connections within our own community and through the world community. And our sister cities include Chino, Japan, Ciudad Guzman, Mexico, and Northern Arapaho tribe from Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. Historically, when President Reagan and the Congress refused to divest from apartheid in South Africa, more than 90 cities acted courageously to divest from South Africa. We're not even asking for divestment, just a resolution. And in doing so, it earned the support of Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the late Nelson Mandela. That led to the 1986 passage of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, a bill that had become so popular by then that it overcame a presidential veto. City leaders and mayors overcame a presidential veto. That is the power you have. Seeing yet another devastating video last night of 3 young orphan siblings huddled together with dust in their hair, crying, literally shell-shocked, hugging each other, and the absolute terror on their faces is too much. Where is our morality? Let not our city be complicit. Let us at least add our name to the over 100 cities who have already stood up and said genocide is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Deborah Crab?
Hello. My name is Deborah Crab, and I'm at 1262 Hummingbird Circle in Longmont. I've been a resident. I also am here to call on the City Council to pass the resolution calling for a ceasefire for Gaza, which includes the immediate and unhindered passage of humanitarian aid. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's not about taking sides at this point, and it does affect us all. As a nurse midwife whose job it has been to help women bring their babies safely into this world and help them feed and nurture their infants and care for themselves, I see the dire situation of women in Gaza trying to find a safe place to give birth. They struggle to feed their babies, and they themselves are hungry. They not only can't produce milk, they also have no access to formula or any other way to feed their child. The agony of a mother who is helpless to feed and care for her children is heartbreaking, and I've seen this suffering. The latest statistics I saw were over 34,000 civilians have been killed, and 70% were women and children. Healthcare providers try to provide what is needed, but over 400 healthcare workers in Gaza have been killed and have been prevented from helping, and 26 of the hospitals are out of service. Having worked myself in Afghanistan during the war, I was there as both a midwife and an educator. I know what it's like to be taken to the hospital in armored vehicles through checkpoints with soldiers and guns along the way. I know what it's like, but it's far worse in Gaza for the healthcare workers. I had hoped this council would pass this resolution and join the other cities in this country and not remain silent. As Martin Luther King said, he who accepts evil without protesting is really cooperating with it. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Chris Alred?
Good evening, Council. Hi, my name is Chris Alred. I'm an 8-year resident of Longmont.
Can I have your address, please?
I provided my address on the sign-up sheet. For the sake of privacy, I'd like to keep it off of the video, please.
You did. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Last week, Marcia Martin introduced a ceasefire resolution to this council, and I wish to commend her for her courage to do so. And it is not easy in the time that we live to speak out on this issue. Nevertheless, I would like to ask, where was the second? Where was the second vote for this motion? Why were you silent? This issue does concern the city of Longmont. It concerns us all. That is becoming more evident simply by looking at the daily news. We know it is affecting our communities. Did you want more members of the community to demand this? Were you waiting for others of your colleagues to express support? This country needs leadership right now. Last time I spoke about systemic violence. The U.S. needs leaders who will speak out against systemic violence. There is a chilling effect on people right now, trying to prevent the public and elected officials from speaking out for justice. The U.S. has been disingenuous, calling for humanitarian aid while providing billions in weapons to a humanitarian crisis. No, this cannot go forward without someone speaking out. That affects us all. That affects everyone in government. The UN International Court of Justice ordered on January 26th, 2024, that it is plausible Israel has committed acts that violate the Genocide Convention. This should give us all great pause. There is no cover for this. It affects everyone in the world. We all need to exercise our ability to speak out for justice. You sit in a position of power that can influence others in government to do the right thing. I hope the next time you are presented with an opportunity to speak out for justice, that you will do so without hesitation. Free Palestine. Long live Palestine.
Thank you, Chris. The next one on the list, I can read the last name. It's Meza.
Thank you, council members. My name is Abe Meza.
I'm sorry, what was your first name?
Abe Meza. Abe.
Okay,
like Lincoln.
thanks.
The address is provided on the paper. I'll follow that lead.
Thank you.
Well, Councilwoman Christ, Councilwoman Hidalgo, Councilwoman Martin, Councilman McCoy, Mayor Peck, Councilman Rodriguez, and Councilwoman Yarbrough. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm here because
Hey,
I
Abe,
was.
Would you mind lowering your mic down to your mouth? There you go. That's
Oh,
much
good.
better.
I'm here because I was condescendingly challenged by the code enforcer manager, Dane Hermson, to come towards the council and attempt to raise my real concerns regarding city code and enforcement, and its relationship with the tax-paying homeowners of Emory and Dogwood Lane. I was looking through available records of code violation reports through 2020 and 2023. Those are the only public one available. In 2020 was 19,000. In 2023, 21,000, with a tendency upwards. To the best of my knowledge, the working class neighborhood was founded in the 80s, and when the public parking lots were also paved, that's when the public parking lots were also paved. Code enforcer manager Dane mockingly deferred my public safety concerns of these neighborhood parking lots and their 40-year-old crumbling infrastructure maintenance to the fact that code enforcement only applies to the public. If this is true, this is a dilemma now that homeowners yearly work hard to live up to city code levels and avoid budget-breaking fines or even jail time when their neighborhood infrastructure is not up to today's needs. New pavement, lighting, and lane painting is needed, to say the least. I believe after 40 years of proud property tax paying and code enforcing compliance and fines, the working class neighborhood at least deserves an honorable public parking lot to come home to at the end of the day. Respectfully, it may be a bit of a stretch, but to some of the neighbors, they may interpret this with the city as trying to have its cake and eat it too. In a less dramatic terms, it would earn the respect of the people by instead leading by example and showing the neighbors the love the city has for its people and encourage their own betterment of their domiciles without fines and code enforcement. I've come with this complaint years before and have seen the wonderful new infrastructure the city has built since. We humbly ask for, and we're just humbly asking for, the 2 public parking lots city-owned to be updated. To end my time, I'm not asking you to fix foreign problems. I'm asking you to fix a problem here. Longmont has undergone drastic economical and cultural changes, and the citizens who have been here throughout that time also desire to grow and change with it instead of being gentrified. I see a future where these changes are promoted and
Thank you.
implemented through respectful and fair implementations in the city which they call home. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Dana Del Vecchio.
Hi, I'm Dana Del Vecchio, 202 9th Avenue. I'm a mom, I'm an educator, come from a family of teachers, my husband, my cousin, my aunt. I stand here with a heavy heart as a resident of Longmont who has seen the profound impact the siege on Gaza has had on our community, our state, and our country. I'm frustrated by Longmont City Council. For about 3 months, oh, and I'm sorry, I also want to mention the 2 women in the back are not part of our group. We have tried to be as respectful as possible for the past 3 months. For the last 3 months, our coalition has engaged with the City Council. Some have shown their support to us, that they would consider our resolution. But now I fear that they pushed our resolution to the side for fear that it would cause disagreement on the council. Isn't a healthy council one that has different opinions but can talk through it to figure out a way forward? Longmont City Council hasn't offered any alternative ideas. They could edit the resolution language to something they're comfortable with. They could offer a community dialogue session knowing that so many of us are suffering. Or they could offer to help us with a fundraiser to acknowledge the dire humanitarian crisis and famine. But they have offered nothing. Although we put our faith in local leaders because that is who we can access, we can't really access our state legislators sometimes. I admit I feel discouraged. Now is the time to follow your conscience, not to worry about disagreement on the council. There are 175,000 Palestinian Americans in this country, of which 3,000 are in Colorado. Don't tell me this isn't a local issue. It has certainly affected Americans. Turn on the news and watch university students speak out for Gaza since they're tired of adults turning a blind eye to this. Have you been to Aurora? There's an encampment there that is 45 minutes away in Denver. And at least 40 people were arrested there. And have you seen all the other university students thrown down to the ground by the police, get kicked out of their universities for demonstrating the First Amendment? They should be protected. Don't Palestinian American lives and their loved ones matter? One of our own members in our group is in Cairo right now because she feels so helpless and hopeless. Longmont isn't doing anything. So she is helping families in Egypt who have nothing, who have lost everything. While they slaughter Palestinians, you expect us to stay silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Jacob Loss.
Jacob Loss, 716 1/2 Main Street. Disappointing. That is the only word, however lacking, I can use to describe my emotions regarding the inaction of this council over the genocide currently being perpetrated in Gaza. The thought that this council can't recognize that the usage of your constituents' tax money is a local issue, and that your refusal to participate in the federation and claim that it is not your duty somehow to hold upper levels of government to account is disturbing, if not surprising. Regardless, those of us who want to see an end to this war, to this genocide, will keep going. We will help those in Gaza and the West Bank. We will do everything we can to secure a permanent ceasefire. We will force the United States to stop using our taxes for more weapons to the state of Israel. We will dismantle the apartheid that our government and the European Union helped to create. And we will do it without you. Because never again means never again for everyone. And we will stand by that regardless of our government's complicity. And so, we will leave here today, disappointed but not broken. But in our departure, I ask that this council reflect on the words of the Israeli Minister of Finance and Minister in the Israeli Defense Ministry, Bezalel Smotrich, one of many men using your constituents' tax money for genocide. On Monday, May 29th, at a Seder on the last day of Passover, Smotrich clearly stated what he intends to use your constituents' taxes for within cities within southern Gaza, the last refuge for Palestinians fleeing death. Smotrich declared, and I'm quoting, "No half-assed job. Lefar, dir el balal, musirat. Total annihilation. Erase the memory of Amalek from under the sky." Remember those words as the invasion of Rafah begins. Remember those words as an Israeli battalion opens fire on more Palestinians trying to get food. Remember those words as another American-made bomb kills an entire family. And remember your silence.
Thank you, Jacob. Yukali Mamay.
See if this works.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Yukali Mamay. I have lived in Longmont for the last 23 years and in Boulder County for the last 33 years. I am deeply aware the weight of the fact that I live within the territory of Arapaho, Cheyenne, and the Ute Nations according to the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. Over the years, indigenous people have taught me the history of genocide, forced displacement, starvation, and theft of the land imposed upon them. As an immigrant, I wish to align myself for atonement for the land I stand on. I support resistance by the indigenous people of Palestine against genocide, theft of the land, and the crime against humanity. I paid over many $1,000s for federal, state, and local municipality tax for 2023. I wish to have my tax money spent on the benefit of our local community, such as healthcare, housing, public education, and infrastructure. While our own veterans struggle, U.S. government has decided to spend another $26 billion for Israel, in addition to several $billion already allocated, while settlers in Israel enjoy free college education, free health care, and housing. Our own citizens are deprived of adequate civil services. With our tax money, Israel had killed tens of thousands of civilians, especially targeting children and women. Occupation force has blindfolded, handcuffed civilians, run over them with tanks, flattened their dead bodies, burned and buried them, or stealing their organs. Genocide is happening right now. As Longmont citizens, we want ceasefire. Yet, you have dismissed our local voice and turned your back on us. You chose to stand on the wrong side of history. You killed even the smallest symbolical act. Shame on you, all of you, except for brave Marsha. We will not forget your betrayal. We will not forgive you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yukali. Drew Soros.
Good evening, Council. Drew Soros at 328 Grant Street, Longmont. I am concerned about the rezoning proposals near the Vance Brand Airport that threaten the essence of our community's stability and growth. The proposed changes in the airport influence overlay have not been well thought through and would result in unintended consequences, including inadvertently turning several people's homes and community buildings into non-conforming uses. This is not just a zoning issue, it's a matter of security and sustainability for many homeowners and residents in our community. Imagine for a moment the distress of families and veterans living in homes that, because of an ill-advised action, might become illegal dwellings. These are not just buildings, they are sanctuaries of safety and peace for many. 6 of the 8 Habitat for Humanity homes and 7 Veterans Community Projects homes, including their administrative building, fell into this jeopardy. Another area poised for affordable housing development is also at risk. The implications are profound. Should disaster strike, be it fire or natural calamity, these homes might not be eligible for rebuilding under the new zoning laws. Consider the impact on property values and insurability. Who would want to invest in or insure a home that might not stand the legal grounds to be reconstructed? This proposal affects real people without adding anything to real safety. We must ask ourselves, is the benefit of this rezoning outweighing the cost of potential homelessness and financial ruin for our fellow citizens? If these changes were to take effect, it would undermine our ongoing efforts to foster affordable housing in Longmont, an initiative that this council has long supported. By making these properties retroactively illegal, we not only stall progress, but potentially regress to a state where the lack of affordable housing becomes an even greater crisis. Equally important, the west side of Longmont is the only remaining area of available land where we can most effectively address the housing shortage. It already has access to mountain views and a terrific trail system. Wouldn't we promote using it? I propose the establishment of a task force comprising city council members, community leaders from Habitat for Humanity, and Veterans Community Project and urban planning experts. Together we can explore sustainable zoning solutions that support growth without compromising the essence of our community. The collaborative approach not only enhances our outcomes, but also ensures all voices are heard and valued. Please let us stand together to protect our rights and homes of our citizens and future citizens, ensuring that every zoning decision supports the rebuilding and resiliency of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Lance Whitaker.
Well, good morning, Mayor, or evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street. I've been a resident 43 years. I've been sitting in this town, and I would like you guys to all know today is National Foster Care Day, National Tourism Day, National Packing Design Day, National Barrier Awareness Day, National Roasted Leg of Lamb Day, and National Paste Up Day, and most importantly, National Teacher Day, Teacher Appreciation Day. I was also notified today was National Fentanyl Day, Fentanyl Awareness Day. Strikes a certain part of my heart, so I will not go into that. And I would like to also say that, yeah, what's going on in Israel and Palestine is horrible, but all war is horrible. And Mayor, I appreciate you trying to say that. And Marcia, I appreciate your work, but all war is horrible, and I would like to see a ceasefire on all war for at least 1 hour. If we could do that for 1 hour, that would be truly amazing. Never mind who's fighting who or what's fighting what. If we could achieve a ceasefire around the world for 1 hour, how amazing would that be? Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. John Lovel.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and City Council. My name is John Lovel. I live at 1137 Fall River Circle. I am also Director of Development for Habitat for Humanity of the St. Vrain Valley, and am here in that capacity tonight. Before expressing our concerns about one of your agenda items, I want to thank the City of Longmont for your long and critical partnership with our work. The average AMI in our recent Mountain Brook homeowners is 44% and represents workers in the St. Vrain Valley School District, childcare, retail, and construction industries. What has brought me here tonight is to express Habitat's concerns about the proposed changes outlined on agenda item 6B. Our executive director has had several questions answered by staff that reduce but don't eliminate some of these concerns. We do recognize that city staff is working hard to create compromise between several competing and legitimate interests. With that said, we still believe the changes to the airport influence overlay zone are of concern for several reasons. First, if adopted, these changes will take land out of our planning area that is supported by current code and long-term planning documents for housing. We've even had early conversations with two of the landowners impacted about the possibility of building Habitat homes on that land. Second, the change in the zoning, as shown, is impacting the 8 homes we just completed at Mountain Brook. And it looks like it is making their residents a non-conforming use. As a non-conforming use, this adds an extra burden to those homeowners. During discussions with staff, we questioned rebuilding in the event of a fire or some other loss. However, in paragraph, I'm going to read this out, 15.03.050A5F, entitled Procedure When Non-Conforming Uses Are Abandoned or Destroyed, it states no building permit shall be granted other than for the demolition and removal of non-conforming structures. So this change would have that effect. Finally, as a non-conforming use, we are concerned about future options and costs associated with insurance and financing. Discussion with 2 lenders suggests lending options may not be available or more costly for these families. We encourage you to keep the impacts to affordable housing in mind. It is our understanding that the type of development currently on the land at Mountain Brook is not an uncommon situation in our country, and we wonder if we are too quickly ceding ground that could serve a higher purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mike Morgan.
Mayor, Council, good evening. I'm Mike Morgan. I'm an attorney with offices at 950 South Cherry Street, Denver, 80246. I'm here this evening representing Modern West, a landowner in Longmont, and a party that would be affected by your proposed change in the airport overlay zoning ordinance. As part of my practice, I've represented general aviation and air carrier airports for about 40 years. And based upon that experience, I'd like to share some comments with you about the proposed ordinance. First, the FAA advisory circular that the amendment is based upon is just advisory. It's not mandatory. It's not a regulation. By its own terms, it cannot be used by FAA in any kind of enforcement action against the airport or the city. FAA doesn't require adoption of the sample ordinance attached to the advisory circular. As a matter of fact, that sample comes from Iowa. And so it doesn't require that adoption. In fact, in my experience, most airports do not have zoning ordinances which have anything like Zone B, in which all residential uses are prohibited. Secondly, the amendment that you're going to consider later this evening for proposal would prohibit, as I said, all residential uses within Zone B. And yet, FAA's noise criteria provides that all residential uses outside a particular airport's 65 LDN noise contour are compatible. They define them as compatible. And therefore, by FAA's own standards, everything in Zone B, residential uses, are compatible with the airport. Residential uses in Zone B also can be compatible with every other FAA standard that's out there in terms of compatibility. Height, safety of aircraft, wildlife attractants, electrical interference, all of those things can be met by residential uses in Zone B. Even the sample ordinance that's attached to the advisory circular and upon which this proposal is based allows, in fact, allows residential uses, some residential uses inside Zone B, but your proposed ordinance would allow none whatsoever. Third, the amendment is prompted by a letter of June 2023 from an FAA employee who asserted that, without support, asserted that allowing residential uses in what would be Zone B might be incompatible with the airport and might constitute a violation of grant assurances.
Thank you, Mike.
3 minutes?
Yep. Good job.
In some, there's no reason under FAA
Scott done?
to do it.
Mayor, we gotta fix the mic.
Mayor, we're having some garbling issues, so I'm going to see if I can fix this.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sandy. Sorry, Scott.
Test, test, test. Okay, there you go.
Good?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Peck and members of council, my name is Scott Dunn, 5918 Blue Mountain Circle in Longmont. I am an attorney and I represent Modern West, whose development is referenced in the letter from the FAA, which is attached as page 20 in the packet for tonight's meeting. It is not advisable for the city to react to this communication from the FAA by starting this process to effectively downzone large areas of Longmont that could otherwise provide housing and other uses vital to this community. The area east of the airport that is proposed to now be subject to this Zone B airport overlay zone is all currently zoned MUE, mixed-use employment. The city engaged in the Envision Longmont process, including extensive public involvement. As a result of that process, the zoning was changed for this area to MUE as part of a vision for a balanced mixed-use community with diverse housing types, affordability alongside commercial and light industrial uses to achieve successful placemaking and create jobs. The zoning decisions of this council were made to promote the Envision Longmont goals, such as mix of uses, higher density, mixed income housing, integration of uses. It would be wrong to now effectively downzone away from achieving these community goals by permanently prohibiting multifamily residential along with other uses, which would occur if this overlay were to go forward. The MUE zoning permits certain residential, including high-density residential, which is crucial to mixed use, as a secondary use. As a secondary use, there is a discretionary level of review as to whether that residential will be permitted, where a wide variety of factors can be considered. Under current city rules, the city decision makers have an opportunity to review whether to permit the secondary uses on a property in this existing process. Decision makers have flexibility to weigh the benefits to the community that a particular project brings against any other considerations, including any concerns the FAA may have, such as those contained in the advisory circular. The city has already used this discretion to deny residential in some areas that would fall into the proposed zone and in other areas that are outside. To proceed with the creation of an extended Zone B would replace the current case-by-case process with inflexible rules and allow this non-mandatory FAA advisory circular to effectively rezone large amounts of MUA property, limiting the number of potential uses in perpetuity without consideration of any competing factors that may be present on a given property. The city already has the tools to limit housing where concerns regarding FAA objection may override the community benefit. However, for those times when the city sees other benefits as carrying more weight, the flexibility to make a variety of decisions as the MUE develops should remain available. We urge this council to direct its staff not proceed with the creation of the Zone B and keep your flexible decision-making process that now exists in place to preserve the possibility for this area to realize intended housing and job growth envisioned in the MUE zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Derek Gasio?
Thank you. Good pronunciation.
Ooh, thanks. Doesn't happen often.
Mayor Peck and members of council, my name is Derek Gasio, and I live at 6185 Brigadoon Court in Longmont. I own land that is part of the area that would be impacted by the adoption of the ordinance staff proposes to create a new approach zone B. This governing body pursued a long process with meaningful public engagement when creating the envisioned Longmont comprehensive plan. You chose to support a mix of uses, including residential in this area, mostly undeveloped land at the western edge of our city. In the envisioned Longmont planning process, the FAA raised none of the concerns of the letter in your packet. Airports and residential with mixed use exist all over and are planned all over the country. The residential uses in this mixed-use district are important to allow owners and renters to be in close proximity to the new jobs created, reducing carbon impact of traveling to work and while playing within the surrounding open space and trail networks that exist. This proposed ordinance overlay would strip the intent and erect barriers to a successful placemaking and mixed-income community. As proposed, residential uses would not only be excluded, but also group living, skilled nursing, rehabilitation centers, lodging of any kind, schools of any kind, including daycares, medical and emergency clinic uses, and any type of assembly uses. How does this impact Vance Brand Airport? I understand that airports across the state and throughout the country are facing new pressures as municipalities embrace various types of mixed-use development to help solve the crisis with housing availability and affordability. Your decision to add a mix of housing types along with job creation was the right decision when you adopted the MUE zoning district here in 2018. Any concerns with the airport and FAA can be addressed with tools that are already in place. What we really need here are cool, sustainable, and intentional mixed-use developments that center around more urban design, not huge, monolithic industrial buildings. This proposed ordinance is framed as being balanced, but the result is to impose inflexible rules that compromise other community goals. Please don't let fears created by a large regulatory agency unravel your policy goals and comprehensive planning. You have the time and current tools to mitigate any future FAA concerns without stripping a large land area of many uses and of its potential to meet your future objectives of affordable and attainable housing and employment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Derek. Kathy Partridge.
I'm Kathy Partridge. I live at 2719 Denver Avenue. I'd like to use my 3 minutes to play another Longmont, a video of another Longmont person. Our member Giselle Hirschfeld, who is she's in Cairo now.
I apologize that I am unable to be there in person to testify today, but I am currently in Cairo to support humanitarian efforts for people living in and evacuating from Gaza. I made the decision to come to Cairo because after half a year of seeing the most horrific images of my life coming out of Gaza and spending virtually every waking moment organizing for a ceasefire and being ignored and dismissed by the people that I elected to represent me, I could not stand by on the sidelines and watch these horrors unfold any longer, especially when these are horrors that I know that I helped to pay for. As I speak to you, only 6 hours from where I am sitting, Rafah is getting carpet bombed and communities are getting massacred. The crossing to evacuate into Egypt has been blocked by Israel and no one is currently able to evacuate. All they can do now is run for their lives and pray for their survival. The stories that I have heard from the Gazan refugees that I have met in Cairo in the last 3 weeks are indescribably horrible and heartbreaking. Imagine having to leave your family and your home country, knowing fully well that there is a genocide happening there and that you may never see them again. Imagine the pain of trying to eat, knowing your family is starving. Imagine the pain of trying to sleep in a bed with a roof over your head, knowing that your family's roof could collapse on their heads at any instant. Imagine having been pulled out from under the rubble of your home and being the only surviving family member. Imagine watching your friends, family, or children die in front of you. I cannot even begin to imagine the depths of the horrors that they are experiencing on a daily basis, but I can tell you that the stories that I have heard speaking directly to Gazan evacuees have changed me forever. In the past 3 weeks, I have had the honor and privilege to meet the most kind, strong, beautiful, and resilient souls I have ever met in my life. Despite all of the traumas that they have endured, the people of Gaza have not allowed themselves to become dehumanized. Israel and the US can take everything from them, but they cannot take away their humanity. Every single Palestinian I have met here has embodied the deepest generosity and kindness of spirit, even if they have lost everything. They will welcome with open arms a foreigner who not only does not speak their language, but who comes from the country that is funding the genocide of their people. Even though they hardly have any money to buy food, they will generously offer whatever they have available, and they will do it with the utmost humility and grace. I am deeply, deeply humbled. Longmont City Council members have said that this is not a local issue and therefore not worth their time. How can you say that it has no local impacts when it is affecting your constituents so deeply that they will show up to City Council week after week begging you to step up and call for peace? How can you say that there are no local impacts when your constituent will literally spend all of their
Thank you,
savings
Kathy.
to travel to a foreign country alone for a month? For trying to
Darn that technology.
the harm being done by
Okay. Daria Lever.
Council, Mayor, my name is Daria Lever, and I live on the 400 block of Emory Street. I am a chingona. In Spanish, that means badass woman. I am here representing life and innocent lives all over the world, globally. I am here to thank Councilwoman Marsha Martin for being a chingona. There are not two sides when it comes to life or death. You are either for life, la vida, or death, la muerte. I am both saddened and horrified that Council has refused to support life and denounce death. I am begging you to pass a ceasefire resolution. Please, 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 choose life. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. Firas Jafar.
Good evening. I'm Firas Jafar. I live off North 75th Street in Western Longmont, Colorado. I second your motion, Councilmember Martin, as would my friends, family, the Ummah, some of the Israelis, and much of the Palestinians who were murdered in and around Gaza since 7 months ago, and most of the world. However, we didn't officially receive a second motion, and you know what? That's all right. I'm not mad or disappointed. I expected that this would take place. I did feel eerie, though, when no one seconded the motion. But I didn't feel a sense of dismissal like I felt in Boulder. I sensed weariness and concern. What can our city council do? What will a proclamation serve our city? How would a resolution make a difference? Answer. And make a small difference. I call it acknowledgement for just peace. And if you can't publicly make this acknowledgement, that's fine. See, there is a great deal of grief in life, and I've learned to streamline my grief towards acceptance. Through acceptance, I've learned to ask myself this: rather than begrudge others, how do I begrudge myself? While the motion died, I'm okay. I'm still alive. What didn't kill me made me stronger. Had it not been for my friends' movement, I never thought I'd be more engaged in civil matters regarding my town, Longmont. That said, I owe it to my friends, family, my fellow citizens in the world to continue to speak for my dear Palestine. So rather than asking what have you or what you should do for peace, I ask myself, what am I doing for peace? I answer, along with prayer, I try and read books. Further, I want to show my support for 5A on the agenda. May 15th, as you know, is Nakba for my Palestinian people. It's also a Nakba for our fallen police officers here in Longmont, Colorado, in America, and worldwide. Also, if there's an agenda item I'd like to add one day, it would be to better grow our library, because knowledge is power. Thank you.
Thank you for us. Mike Sandoval.
City Council Mayor, Mike Sandoval, 242 East Mountain View. I've lived in Longwood about 5 decades. One of the problems I've had is someone stole my dad's vehicle, and I called the police, and they didn't do anything. I also went to a landlord associated meeting in Boulder County, and I talked to one of the police officers there, and I tried to find some answers. And I asked, because there's some, at the intersections, there's some video cameras. And I've asked the police, can you look at those video cameras at these intersections? And I found out that most of them aren't active. There's only a few, like 4. So one of my answers would be, not just for me, but for all of Longmont, to activate more video cameras at intersections. So if there is theft, at least the license plates can be looked and find this person, narrow them down. So that's my recommendation. The other part would be, since I see these global issues, and there's a lot of funding for these global issues, can we stop charging senior citizens property taxes so there'll be less funding out there for global issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Harrison Earl.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Harrison Earl, 1506 Chukar Drive. As many of you know, I serve as the Airport Advisory Board Chair. However, I'm speaking to you tonight on my own. I am talking about airport issues, but not representing those of the board. Really just wanted to thank you tonight for your interest in the airport. You have 2 agenda items, which is unusual for us to be in front of you with that. Excited for you to hear what's going on at the airport in item 6A, such as our air show coming up, development at the airport, and more. There is a discussion of alternative fuels at the airport, and do want to remind you that last year, on the advice of the advisory board, you passed a sustainability resolution that set the framework for future, more environmentally friendly fuels at the airport and ongoing efforts to electrify. We wish that technology would move faster. We wish we were talking about it sooner with you, but do want to remind you that that is in place as a policy document and a vision for the airport and for the city of Longmont. 6B is about the airport influence zone. I am generally pro-housing in the city broadly. I do think we need more of it, and it is very important. As has been stated, the cost of housing is a choice. There's 2 elements to this influence zone discussion. One is navigation easements broadly across the entire zone. These are simply disclaimers. This is a note. The airport has existed since 1945. Airports occasionally create noise. You are aware you're living close to an airport. That's been extensively discussed during our advisory board meetings, and while I can't speak for the other members, every single one has been in favor of that discussion up to this point. I do also generally support limiting residential uses in the immediate proximity of the airport. We have seen cases throughout the country where there are noise concerns, safety concerns, health concerns for being that close to the airport. I am sympathetic to the specific concerns that have been raised tonight. I don't know enough to address them. I would encourage you to ask those questions of staff, but do generally believe that residential uses are incompatible in the immediate proximity of an airport. With that, just want to thank you for your interest, for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out through the board. I know you all know how to get in touch with me and love to talk to the airport anytime. Thank you all.
Thank you, Harrison. Beverly Claridge.
Beverly Claridge, 1760 Sunlight Drive, Longmont, 80504. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Peck and members of the council. I rise this evening to make a suggestion. I noticed that we have a lot of people participating in council meetings recently, and that's wonderful. But I also noticed that many of them do not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. And from my perspective, if you don't care enough to stand for the flag, you shouldn't be in the facility where we are repeating that. So I would like to offer that as a possibility, or if they choose not to stand, suggest that they stay in the lobby until such time as they are invited back in. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Beverly. Peggy Altshuler.
Good evening, Mayor and Longmont Council. I came across an article today with the topic at hand for this evening in the New York Post, and it was written by a gentleman that works for the Center for Immigration Studies. He's addressing issues that pertain to our Biden administration when they consider bringing Gaza refugees into the United States. And some things that he wanted to point out are very pertinent to our topic at hand. Before the October 7th Hamas attack, Israeli citizens sponsored work permits for thousands of security vetted Palestinians to earn money working on some of their farms in towns not far from the Strip. Some of those Gazan day laborers are believed to have used their access to provide tactical information that helped Hamas terrorists kill hundreds of Israelis on October 7th. There are bad apples, lessons that are coming from that developing story, and another where security vetted Palestinian UN workers directly assisted the October 7th hackers. And it's central to the problem with a possible American plan to import refugees into America. That's because just about all of the Gaza Strip's 2 million inhabitants have gone through decades of institutionalized cradle-to-grave indoctrination into the ruling Hamas upside-down 7th century Islamic value system, featuring at its core an extremely violent religious ideology. Hamas relentlessly preaches that humanity's highest virtues are suicide bombing, armed combat, genocide, intolerance of difference, and a dehumanizing hatred of Jews and Americans. Recall the recent reports of jubilant children, women, and men cheering, spitting at, and even beating on Israeli hostages as they were paraded through Gaza after the October 7th attack. Hamas starts things up in kindergarten with the children of Gaza and ramps up the training all the way through their universities. Speaking of hatred and offering law degrees from a Sharia law department, and whose engineering department is to churn out combat engineers for Hamas tunnels. Required school textbooks and curriculum infuse the next generation with its militant ideology. The children are never taught to recognize that modern Israel is more than anything but a target of genocidal violence. Gaza's school curriculum is replete with thousands of examples of violent incitement against the Jewish state and the Jewish people. Even camp counselors during summer camps dish out violent Islamic ideology and military training in order to prep them for their armed forces. Teachers teach the children that killing Jews is a solemn religious duty where martyrdom earns the believers paradise in heaven. The next generation of Palestinians, idolization of terrorists, the demonization of Jews, and the conviction that sooner or later Israel should cease to exist. I commend you for your decision to not take a part in the proclamation.
Thank you, Peggy. Steve Altshuler.
Good evening. Steve Altschuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. God, there's so many thoughts I had while I was up there, and I can remember which is which. First of all, I want to thank you all for having the courage to stay out of something that doesn't really matter right here in Longmont. It is an important matter without a doubt, but it doesn't really matter for City Council in Longmont, in my opinion. Obviously, on October 6th, there was peace, and that peace was broken by Hamas attacking Israel. They didn't attack soldiers. They attacked individual citizens, babies, mothers, grandmothers, raping, beheading. I know this because my nephew is in the IDF, and he had the wonderful task of picking up the dead bodies. So no one's going to tell me it didn't happen. My own nephew had to deal with that. Also, on December 6, 1941, we were at peace. And then Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And over 3,000 people were killed that day, but at least they attacked soldiers, sailors on the ships, even though they didn't know there was a war going on. 6 months later, Doolittle attacked Japan anyway. And nobody said, okay, you got this many and we got this many, let's call a halt to it. Because Japan was raised that they had to kill everybody. They did kamikazes, which meant killing themselves by flying their plane into a ship. And they did not care who they killed, and we knew we had to end that Japanese threat. We knew we had to end the German threat in World War II. It's the same thing with Israel now. On October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israelis, people in Gaza were seen in the streets cheering, just like they did on 9/11. They are happy to support Hamas. They voted in Hamas. I want peace over there too. I've got 20 family members. But if you want to talk about peace, if Gazans want peace, then they need to turn over all the terrorists who are hiding in civilian clothes, who are hiding in and under hospitals because they're afraid, whereas the IDF has a uniform, they're easily identifiable. So when they killed 1,200 civilians that day, they knew who they were killing. It wasn't an accident. Last week, Americans were attacked while they were building a pier to bring in aid, and Hamas attacked them. They're stopping the aid from coming to Gaza. This week, more Israelis were attacked while they were bringing aid into Gaza. It's the Hamas that want to keep this war going. Many of us would like peace, but you can't have peace until the terrorist threat is over. And if you look at all of our colleges throughout our country, what are they saying? Death to Israel, death to America. They're not asking for peace.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
So seeing no one else on the list, I will close first call public invited to be heard, and let's take a 5-minute break.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for listening to us and Dave did appreciate it.
Well, I just poured in.
I think you tried to lifted.
Yeah, there's some
stuff that, I feel good that you would do that for us, but 6 years, 10 years down the road, someone say, oh, no, that doesn't work anymore.
Well, that's part of it is that the legal non-conforming is really not doing anything. That's the thing is, we have a lot of this now. And as long as the use continues, you can rebuild it. It's not just like you can actually rebuild it. And we deal with that all the time.
Well, that's the place where we felt, if you want to get rid of it, it's that something that just mentioned talk.
Yeah, we were thinking of maybe we could.
Yeah, I know, that would be good, so we appreciate it. But again, we got the whole
How are you? Good.
Test, test, test. Let me check Susie's mic too. Susie, do you want me to go ahead and have more? Test, test, test. Yep. I don't know.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I put part of the agenda on hold so that the people that were in the chamber would have a chance to speak. So we're going to go back to the first part of the agenda again, and we have a couple of proclamations to read. And I hope the people are still in the chamber to receive these proclamations. The first proclamation is a proclamation designating the week of May 12th through the 18th, 2024 as National Police Week, and further designating May 15th, 2024 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which it falls as National Police Week. And whereas the members of the Longmont Police Department plan an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the residents of Longmont, Colorado. And whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency who serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the Northern Colorado Regional Peace Officers Memorial Service will be held at 4:30 p.m. on May 15th, 2024 at the Longmont Civic Center Interior Mall. Now, therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, call upon all residents of Longmont to observe the week of May 12th through the 18th, 2024 as National Police Week, commemorating law enforcement officers past and present who have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and securities of all citizens. I further call upon all residents of Longmont to observe Wednesday, May 15th, 2024, as Peace Officer Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of duty, and let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. Do I have someone that is going to accept this proclamation and perhaps say a few words?
Yes, Mayor Beck, I'm James Taylor, lead chaplain for Longmont Public Safety.
The mic.
James Taylor.
There you go.
Okay. James Taylor, I'm the lead chaplain with Public Safety Chaplains, and this is Crystal, one of our other chaplains. We're here to accept the proclamation and want to invite all citizens to join us on May 24th. It'll be at 4:30 here in the Civic Center for the service. We have 4 fallen officers that we'll be honoring this year, so we would welcome anyone to participate with us in the service, but also recognize our law enforcement agency here as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Do you want a picture?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
So I want to make a correction. It is May 15th that we are going to have the commemorating the ceremony in the Civic Center Mall. The next proclamation is a proclamation designating May 5th through the 11th, 2024 as Public Service Recognition Week, recognizing advisory board members in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, and scientists, government employees, nurses, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, social workers, and countless other occupations. And whereas every year the first week of May is dedicated to recognizing these dedicated public servants. And whereas this year the City of Longmont wishes to recognize the almost 200 volunteer advisory board members during Public Service Recognition Week for their dedication to public service. And whereas advisory board members fulfill the important function of advising and providing recommendations on policies, regulations, and operations to the City Council. And whereas advisory board members dedicate numerous hours of their own time each month to help ensure this community is a wonderful place to live in, work in, and play in. Now, therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue and the authority vested in me in the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim May 5th through the 11th, 2024, as Public Service Recognition Week in Longmont, and urge all residents to recognize and acknowledge our hardworking city employees and our volunteer advisory board members for their dedication and service to our community. And I want to take a moment to do a little marketing. We would love to have everyone out there come and apply for to be on a board. It is a great opportunity, and we really need your help in helping us with our city policies and guiding all of us. So, who is here to accept this? Do you want to accept it? Come on up. Sure. Okay. Do you want to say a few words, or are you good to go? Do you want a picture? Yes. Okay. Anyone who stays to the end of the day.
Yes, that's right.
There were a lot of us here before.
Yes, there were.
Yeah, if you're on a board, come for the picture.
Yes. More board members here. Yeah, Oh, there you are.
It's magnetic, so right. We have to squish together though, like we're friends. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And one more.
Thank you. And we are now on the US 287 Vision Zero Safety and Mobility Study presentation. And I see staff is here already.
Good evening, members of council. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. We're going to try to find this presentation now that it's up and maybe running, so we're pretty excited that we might be able to show you. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you, yay.
Yay. Yeah, everybody's very excited. we got 3 presentations coming up for you all, so appreciate that. I just wanted to say that we did bring this in front of the council for your approval for acceptance of this study on April 23rd. And there were some questions, and we were unfortunate did not have the staff available to answer some of those questions. So we have Alex Hydewright and Landon Hilliard both here tonight to help present on this topic. So I'm going to sit back and let them go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Hello, City Councilors. My name is Landon Hilliard. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with Boulder County. And to my right is Alex Hydewright. He's the manager of the Regional Multimodal Transportation Planning Division with Boulder County. We're happy to have the time to speak to you briefly about this safety study, and we appreciate the fact that on April 23rd, you did pass a resolution, and so we're here to fill the gaps, give a high-level summary, and then have a discussion to whatever wishes that you would like. So, it's encouraging that we have the audio, the visual back.
Yes.
If there are 3 takeaways from this safety study about US 287. The first is that the corridor is an essential spine for regional and local travel. The second is that the corridor is highly evolving, changing fast. And the third is there are known safety problems, both within the city of Longmont, but also outside of Longmont on either end in the high-speed rural areas. And that's the primary reason that we're here. So I'm going to give you just a bit of background and then pass it on to Alex to talk about the safety analysis and recommendations. So, you got it, yeah, thank you. The context here is that there are a number of stakeholders who are involved in the study and going forward to implement the recommendations from the city of Longmont up to regional and state and even federal level. And these stakeholders are part of a coalition that basically is a part of a forum to coordinate the efforts, the analysis, the opportunities, and advance the goals to meet increasing travel demand and improve safety along the corridor. So the background is the study area is about 24 miles. In the south is Broomfield, in the north is the city of Longmont with 6 key stakeholders. It's a mix of urban, rural, and suburban land use. Dr. Cog, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, has identified the whole corridor as a high injury corridor. Back in 2014, the Northwest Area Mobility Study identified the corridor as an important area to give transit improvements and safety, and a transit feasibility study was performed as phase 1 of this safety study. So why is it important? Well, generally speaking, there's social, environmental, and economic reasons, but practically speaking, we have problems with air pollution, traffic congestion, and safety and mobility. As I mentioned, This corridor is forecast to have great growth both in jobs and in housing, and by 2045 in the 20-year horizon, DRCOG has suggested through modeling that there'll be a 75% increase in both housing and jobs. The study timeline had to do with over about 15 months, looking at analysis and then framing basically safety recommendations, penciling those out into design, and then in December 2023, a final draft or final report was produced, which is the basis of what we're speaking to you about. So for outreach, we've done extensive outreach that included online opportunities as well as community engagement to nonprofits and to stakeholders and to organizations along the corridor. And the outreach confirms what we expected going into this, that safety is by far the most important issue. Also, connectivity, improving the intersections and operations of traffic, and also multimodal options so that people can decide and have options to the car. Along those lines, we did a walk-bike feasibility study to look at the possibility of some kind of separated multi-use path along the corridor. And of those who took the survey, most of whom were drivers, about 3/4 said they'd be interested if the conditions, if the circumstances were appropriate. And then there are a load of considerations that need to go into looking at a walk-bike path feasibility. And there are two connections that citizens have said they're important, one between Longmont and Lafayette, and then moving further south between Lafayette and Bloomfield. And with that, I'll pass it to Alex Hyde-Wright to talk about the safety analysis and recommendations.
Thank you, Landon. Anyone who's been following the headlines in the Times call over the last several years knows that US 287 is a dangerous highway. We have a lot of serious injury and fatal crashes, and in fact, a very high percentage of all the fatal crashes in Boulder County occur on US 287. I'm not going to go through every statistic on the slide, but our fatal crash trend has continued unabated throughout the analysis window of the crashes that we looked at, as well as throughout the study itself. As part of our safety analysis, we were looking in particular at the severe injury and the fatal traffic crashes. We're also looking at those crashes where we have a high potential for reducing them, as well as working with all of our different stakeholders on these opportunities. Our existing conditions for our analysis, we grouped the crashes into several types. Those are shown in the different diagrams on the slide here. And then we paired each of those crash types with a countermeasure. And so there's different countermeasures that we've recommended to address each of those crash types. And then intersection by intersection, we flagged which crash types are present at which intersections, and therefore which countermeasure will be recommended to be implemented at the different intersections. Our study includes a detailed analysis. We go intersection by intersection throughout Longmont as well as the rest of the corridor. We have a couple on the slide here, and we'll be happy to go into more detail with some of the specific recommendations if council would like after our presentation. In addition to this intersection by intersection approach, we also took a deeper dive into select locations where we took a concept design to take those recommendations a little bit further and start designing those. We selected 12 locations throughout the corridor with a handful in each different jurisdiction, generally selected from among the higher crash intersections within the study area. Showing which of those intersections we looked at within the city of Longmont for that concept design. That includes starting at the north end, 23rd Avenue, 17th, Mountain View, 9th, and in the south, Plateau Road. I'm going to skip over some of these intersection recommendations here, but just showing that we looked at the top countermeasures and then additional countermeasures for each of those intersections. And so we have kind of a play-by-play of what we'd recommend for each intersection, and then we'll be working with the City of Longmont staff, turning over implementation of these recommendations to them and CDOT and then as part of the City of Longmont's upcoming Vision Zero efforts. Skipping now to the rural unincorporated Boulder County sections of US 287. One of our more severe and persistent crash trends that we're seeing is head-on and crossing the center line crashes, and that's where, for whatever reason, a driver crosses the center median and enters oncoming traffic, which all too often results in a fatal traffic crash. Our study recommended a median barrier to prevent these types of crashes. And we've looked at 3 broad types of barrier: the cable rail, guardrail, and cast in place, ultimately recommending a concrete cast in place concrete barrier due to the negligible maintenance effort required, as well as its ability to reduce those crashes that we're seeing. Oops. Oh, no.
I don't think you did.
Our quick actions include pursuing grant funding for the construction of those center median barriers that are, again, going to mitigate one of our more persistent and frequent crash trends. Working with CDOT on a speed study pilot in the Lafayette section of US 287 to look at adjusting the speed limits. Consideration of speed photo radar along the corridor, and then working on some of those quick build traffic signal timing improvements and visibility enhancements. And just want to highlight on that top note that we partnered with CDOT. They've taken the lead on a grant application that was submitted either late last week or yesterday to one of the federal grant rounds, the MPDG, which is the Multimodal Planning and Design Grant, I believe, that would fund a number of safety improvements from the city of Lafayette all the way up to the Wyoming border. And in Boulder County would fund 12 miles of concrete median barrier in those 2 rural sections of 287 north and south of Longmont. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions that council has.
Thank you for this presentation. I know you went through it really fast. I was trying to read it.
Yeah.
But it's great, and I know you've been working on it for a long time. So do we have any questions or concerns, comments from counselors? Counselor Hidalgo-Fearing.
Thank you, Mayor. So this one actually goes back to the study timeline, where I see that community engagement pretty much runs through the entire process. So in part of the community engagement, is that really just kind of explaining to residents and what's going to be happening? Are you eliciting input?
Yeah.
Will there be revisions to the plan as time goes on?
So we had 3 major touch points of community engagement throughout the project, one closer to the front of the study, and that was a bit more open-ended, and that was reaffirming the study goals, asking the public about priorities for the process and what we should be focusing on. And then we took all that input, and then in addition with our technical analysis, came up with a number of recommendations, and then went back out to the public to affirm, did we take your recommendations and all the data that we're seeing, did we get it about right? Are these recommendations hitting on what's important to you? And then we took that input, and then we had a 3rd round of review, which is essentially our, I don't want to say 90% draft report out to the public, and then got further refinements on that final report before taking it from 90 to 100% done. And so we had surveys. I believe we had an online map where you could pin your comments.
Okay, yeah.
So we had a number of different formats. The 2 primary touch points were virtual open houses that we conducted, and we had, that's a slide from one of the virtual open houses. So obviously emulating the traditional gymnasium where you go to the website and then click on the different boards and sort of walk through the different study materials, and it would solicit feedback as you went along.
And how much participation did that type of platform get? And I mean, I can always email you later if you don't have it off the top of your head.
I remember 356 comments somewhere.
Landon has the number 356 in his head. I believe that was comments.
Distinct comments.
Okay, thank you.
And just as Alex suggested, it's an iterative process to go through identifying the needs, understanding what the existing conditions are, and then designing to reduce injury and make a more multimodal, comfortable corridor. And because the next phase of this will seek funding, more community engagement will follow. So it builds on itself.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No, I'm three.
But it's not on. I didn't see
Just
you.
go, just turn.
Okay. Counselor Christ.
We have a Vision Zero task force for the city of Longmont, and since 287 goes all the way through Longmont, is there going to be some interaction, collaboration, overlap with the task force here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our idea is to use this plan when we're going back through, and the idea that we have a center of excellence that's being put together that's going to include all the different aspects of the city for Vision Zero. Right now, Kemi Edson in the back is putting that together for us, so we really appreciate her efforts, but it's a process. So we're starting to get to that process of getting the task force put together and then the action plan put together after that. And that'll include, I mean, these elements of the study are very important to us, so they'll be very helpful to tell us kind of those next steps. We're working on some of those right now, but it'll help us with the full action plan.
Will there be a separate group for 287, a separate task force for 287? Or will it all be?
The idea right now is that we'd have the task force for the entire city of Longmont, but obviously 287 has a lot of those vulnerable road user crashes and fatalities, unfortunately, so that'll be a focus for our group. But it also, that's what we have to do in partnership with CDOT, as they're the technically the owners of that road.
Because it's a highway.
Right, it's a state highway, U.S. highway, state highway. So we do have to work with them in partnership. So.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So my question is revolving around the median barriers. So having the cable rail, the guardrail, and the cast in place, seems like all three would be effective in protecting oncoming traffic from a vehicle crossing center line. And you've stated that the cast in place is the most cost effective from a maintenance standpoint. My question, though, is surrounding the survival rate of the car that would potentially be crossing center line in the three different scenarios, because I thought that's the reason that cable rail was essentially instituted in, was to increase the survival rate of a car either going off one way or the other. Was that considered when talking about the three different options?
So the safety analysis that we did as part of the study for the median barrier showed pretty similar safety benefits for all three barrier types. And ultimately, we looked to CDOT to really tell us what they're comfortable with, because as the owner of 287 in the rural sections, maintenance, construction and maintenance of the median barrier is ultimately going to fall to them. And they were, I would say, concerned about the maintenance implications of cable rail and guardrail, whereas when that's hit, you have to go out and repair it for it to maintain its effectiveness, whereas concrete barrier is pretty much set it and forget it. You've got a multi-decade lifespan. And so for the safety benefits, seeing similar benefits for all three barrier types, but with CDOT really leaning towards the concrete barrier for not needing that much maintenance, that's how we ended up with that recommendation.
Okay, so it was a CDOT heavy recommendation is what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I have a very simple question. I see on some of these different streets you have, as far as some of the protections, a bulb out. What is a bulb out? It's on 9th Avenue. It's the first place I saw it.
So a bulb out is also known as a curb extension, and it's typically done where you have on-street parking. And so at the intersection, you don't bring your on-street parking all the way up to and through the crosswalk. And so at the crosswalk, you can bring the curb in by the width of your on-street parking to reduce the crosswalk distance, which has a number of benefits for pedestrians and also signal operations, because then you can shorten your pedestrian countdown phase, and it also gives more visibility between drivers in the traffic lanes and the pedestrians on the curb.
Thank you. And I think maybe Phil can answer this. Is that what we have on Third Avenue? Is a bulb out?
We have, we have a neck down there as on Third Avenue, I think is where you're talking about specifically, but we have used bulb outs in different parts of the city, so
Oh, okay.
we do have those available, and we've been using them to extend the intersection or extend the walking area for the pedestrians. It makes them more visible too. It brings pedestrians protected into the intersection so they can be seen. It brings stop signs out into the intersection so they can be more visible. So there's a lot of benefits to the bulb out and the neck downs.
And the reason I brought it up is because many people, I travel out every day, and it works. I was very pleased with that redesign of Third Avenue, so. I just didn't know what it was called. So, seeing no one else in the queue for comments or questions, thank you very much for this presentation and for all your hard work.
Thank you for your time.
We are now on our study session items. The first one is City of Longmont Vance Brand Airport update, and I see Levi, the airport manager, is here.
Presentation. Get the microphone going here. Hi, Levi Brown, Airport Manager, Vance Brand Airport, and I'm here to give a quick update for you on the Vance Brand Airport, logically, right? All right. Got some few items to go over today. We're going to talk about current activities that have been going on at the airport. Just a little quick overall update, particularly things that have been going on this spring. We're going to talk about some of the projects that we got going on this year and next year. We've been asked to talk a little bit about unleaded aviation fuel, so we'll be talking about that. Potential commercial development at the airport, and also we'd like to cover the air show we got coming up this September. Okay, current activities this spring, actually just ending a couple weeks ago. The National Guard had their fire season preparedness exercise. They usually do that annually out here at our airfield. Any given time, they'll have, a couple times a week, they'll have 4 or 5 helicopters out here over about a 2-week period in the middle of April. And that's what they use as their preparedness training for the fire season. So they'll send the crews up in the mountains. They'll draw water from lakes. They'll do practice dumps. They've also have their medical teams that come out and they do practice, running back and forth, simulating accidents and stuff like that. So that just wrapped up at the airport here a little bit ago. So great turnout. We usually get a lot of the public come out to watch the helicopters that time too. And the National Guard guys are always really great. They like to talk to the kids and they show them the helicopters and stuff like that. So that went really well. From that particular one, we did get a few noise complaints on that one, but not too bad. Just a couple people called in on that. Additionally, I just wanted to give also a quick update on noise complaints in general. 2024 complaints specifically. So far, we've had 17 household complaints for the airport, so pretty good statistics. 2 complaints specific to Mile High skydiving so far, which is about on par. We had 4 total complaints from households last year for Mile High skydiving. So, pretty good figures. And there's some more of the National Guard guys in a little picture taken off there. All right, airport projects. Big project for this year is going to be the completion of the airport wildlife fence out. The airport, we've had a partially completed fence on the airport for quite a while now. We're finally circling back to getting that completed. We're going to be using our entitlement funding from CDOT and from the FAA. We're going to get about $13,000 from CDOT and about $237,000 from the FAA for that project. Grant's currently working on that. 2025 pavement rehab project, we're going to be doing a rehab of the apron area, also known as the ramp. That's the large concrete parking area out there on the airfield. And in addition to that, some taxiway connectors that go to the runway, the little short chunks of taxiway that connect up to the runway. That one is a pure CDOT grant. They're going to give us $421,000 for that one. That grant is actually already complete, so that's nice to be able to have that already set, so it makes procurement and planning a whole lot easier for that. In addition to those two projects, we did just apply for emissions and energy discretionary grant with the FAA. That came out, they announced that about a month ago, and they gave everybody about a month to apply for it, so we kind of jumped on top of that and got that out there. The FAA announced they had some additional dollars for essentially green initiatives, if you will. As you know, we just passed our sustainability resolution. We're looking to head that way, so we put in a project for lighting and signage rehabilitation at the airport, which is something that's going to be on our to-do list sooner rather than later anyway, and that's of course the LED transition of the airfield would help massively make the airfield more efficient as far as energy costs go. And we did put in a request for $774,000 for that one. So here's knock on wood. That one just went in about a week ago. So, all right. Unleaded aviation fuel. Unleaded aviation fuel is something that I've personally been following in the industry for quite a while. In this position and in my previous position, I dealt heavily with this subject. Longmont's actually a little bit ahead of the curve. We do offer MoGas here, or rather I should say that our local FBO, or fixed base operator, offers MoGas for sale. We're one of the few airports in the region which you can obtain gas without lead in it, so that's good. There is some additional steps. It's not quite like a car where you just pull up to the pump and pump it into your plane. For individuals to utilize that, they'll have to actually go to the FAA. They'll have to apply for what's known as a supplemental type certificate and get their aircraft recertified to burn that fuel. We've had some good turnout on the airfield. We've had quite a few people go through that process, including one of the flight schools, which is great because they're one of the users that use the most small airplane fuel, so that's great to have them participating in that. Looking at a more broad view of it, the FAA's most recent incarnation of their unleaded fuel project is the Eagle project. There was a project that was in the works prior to the pandemic that kind of fell through when everything else fell through. But actually just got updated on that project last week at the National Airports Conference. Eagle project, they're shooting to have completely unleaded fuel nationwide by 2030. So that would be fantastic if they can make that a reality. It is something that they communicate with a lot of airports on, with a lot of airport users on. So it is a big project with the FAA. And just kind of an incidental little comment to that, they're very serious about it, and there's nothing hard written, but kind of the word of mouth is expect future grant assurances when they redo the grant assurances for airports to probably include requirements for unleaded fuel at small airports. It's probably coming. A little additional information on unleaded aviation fuel. It can kind of be a hard concept to wrap your head around because we've been using unleaded fuel in cars forever since I want to say was it 84 that they made it illegal in cars or something like that. With aircraft, it's going to be kind of a similar transition, but with a little bit of extra regulatory headaches thrown in. Currently, our challenges, one of the biggest challenges that we're actually suffering is just getting the supply, just getting people to make it. Last year during the spring conference of the Colorado Airports Association, just the day that the conference began, one of the largest producers out in Washington actually closed their factory doors. So that was kind of a slap in the face to everyone. And I know Telluride Airport was all excited about they were going to switch to all unleaded fuel, and that kind of set them back also. Other challenges, mixability, products being able to be mixed with current fuels, which is something that you might not necessarily think about in this process. But if I pull my plane up to a pump at an airport that only serves unleaded fuel, I got to know that if I got leaded at the last airport, I can dump that unleaded right in there, and it's not going to cause any maintenance issues. That's a big sticking point when we're we're talking about this in conferences and going back and forth, that they're still working out with some of these products that they got going on. FAA regulatory approval, as always. The FAA is a paperwork-heavy organization, and I say that as someone who's worked very closely with them their whole life. Getting them to move forward with approving fuels, which they're doing a decent job on. A recent one, the Swift fuel, was approved not that long ago. But more to the point, making sure that they're actually allowing the airplane users to use the fuels in their plane is going to be important. Currently, much like with the case of MoGas, to go through that process, it takes a lot of initiative on the owner's part. You've essentially got to go out to the FAA and recertify your plane to operate to use unleaded fuel. So my personal hope as a former chief pilot and as a pilot myself is I would hope that the FAA would step up and do some blanket approvals for our folks out there in the aviation industry to make that transition a little easier. And kind of last item I have there on our challenge is infrastructure. And by that I mean fuel farms, fuel trucks. Anytime you have a new product out there, you're going to have new tanks, new trucks to support it moving forward. All right. A little additional information on current options out there as far as unleaded aviation fuel goes. MoGas, which is good. Essentially, that's just ethanol-free, high-octane gas. There are some options for that, and as I mentioned, we are providing some of it. That's great. Not all aircraft can use that, but there are ones that can potentially apply to get that transition. GAMI is a unleaded aviation fuel that's been around since 2015. That's kind of lost a little bit of steam. They've been having some issues with the success rate of that fuel. Swift is a newer one, which just came out a little while ago. There's a little more hope for that. It was the most recently approved FAA fuel. Just a few months back, though, unfortunately, UND, who was kind of their test case for the Swift fuel, has completed their whole fleet over to it. UND, of course, the University of North Dakota, one of the largest flying schools in the nation, converted their whole fleet over to it, and they've unfortunately stepped back and aren't doing that anymore. They had some significant engine fouling issues and erosion on their exhaust valves. So they're taking a pause from that, but with all advances in technology, there's going to be setbacks and adjustments in moving forward. All right. Commercial development out at Vance Brand Airport. Nothing set in stone in the works right now. Kind of the work that we've been doing recently is just making sure that we as the airport are potentially ready for commercial development should we decide to move forward in that direction. So needed infrastructure for commercial development. We recently completed a sewer project on the south side of the airport, so we have sewer. We have relatively decent access to water. Electricity is being expanded at the airport also with new conduit run. When they started to do that, we did have conversations with the city's electric team, making sure we had lots of conduit space, a potential transition to electric aircraft and stuff like that, so that was considered. Our big project right now on the airport to make sure we complete is a drainage review. So the runoff review, the water review for the airport. And that's kind of the one unknown factor on the land we have left to develop, what it would take to make that land developable. So we're currently having a survey done, a master drainage review. So we've asked the deliverables to come out of that being, what's your guys' recommendation? What do we need to do to, phase in, any given amount of construction on the airfield, and what are the approximate costs for that? So that survey is supposed to be done by the 1st of June, and we'll have more information on it. And after that stage, we as a city can decide, put out requests for proposals. We do have many people interested in potentially developing on the airfield. There is a rather significant shortage of hangar space on the Front Range in general. Hangar space is at a high premium. Yeah. All right. See what else I got. All right, air show update. Future of Aerospace is the title of our air show. It'll be on September 14th, 2024. It is free to the public. The events team is estimating about 5,000 people are going to be there, so it should be a pretty good sized event. They're also currently still looking for donors and sponsors for that, so that's one of the big tasks we have moving forward at the moment. Some of the planning we've already been done. An air boss has already been secured. That's a huge step right there. Air boss is the individual that the FAA requires to manage the show. They're usually pretty pricey. We had a local gentleman give us a very good deal on that. Acts are mostly set. We'll have food trucks. There's a band that's going to come. There'll be stack displays, car shows, and more. So it's turning out to look like a pretty good event. All right. And that's what I have for the airport update.
Thank you, Levi. This is great. Are you open for questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Councilwoman Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. On the subject of unleaded aviation fuel, you mentioned recertification without a lot of detail about what that is, but I mean, I assume that it's just like testing out any other internal combustion engine on, does it knock too much, does it lose power, does it, because if you lose power in the air, that's bad. But are there also going to be conversion kits for the fuel train? Because, some of the planes we've got out at KLMO are like 100 years old.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to adjust it. So when you're talking about certification in that respect, what you're talking about is certification in the individual aircraft. So when an aircraft comes off the production line, it comes with what's known as a type certificate. So that's essentially that aircraft's, it's a little bit different than cars. That's aircraft's permission to exist and run as an aircraft in the United States. So when you want to do something that's out of the ordinary with that certification, which a different fuel is a big jump on that, you actually have to go essentially back to the FAA and say, look, I can prove that my aircraft can run, legally with this in it. To my understanding, most of the work being done currently has been trying to create a fuel which you can just put into your plane without a whole lot of modification on the plane itself.
Okay.
But I certainly know with other supplemental type certificates that I've been familiar with that is certainly an option. So should someone come up with a method of saying, hey, if I do X, Y, Z to this engine, I can make it run, 88 octane car gas, then that could be a supplemental type certificate also, and that would be its own type, its own version, and there would be separate paperwork for that.
Okay, but you don't know of any such kits right now?
Not that I know. To my understanding, most of the research and development is going into creating a fuel that they can just put into the current aircraft.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Pick. On your slide 4, you had the current activities and 2024 complaints. And so right now you've had about 17 from folks about noise and everything like that.
We've had 17 complaints altogether. The vast majority of them, or I should say 17 household complaints altogether, the vast majority of them are noise, but there's few, we'll get some random ones like there's just too many planes. The noise doesn't bother me, but there's too many and stuff like that. But the vast majority of them are noise complaints.
Okay. So as a parent of 2 Silver Creek graduates, on this coming Saturday, this May 25th, Saturday, May 25th, they're holding graduations outdoors at all of our St. Vrain schools. And consistently, as a parent who's had 2 students that graduated specifically at Silver Creek, the last moment for students to have their choir presentation, the last moment for someone to give a speech, and there's somebody who's a bad neighbor there. And we need to have a conversation with that individual, because it's really only one that seems to be a bad neighbor that doesn't understand that flying over those events, even if they're at the proper altitude, is just like that buzzing, droning when somebody's trying to give their speech and the parents are trying to hear it and the grandparents have come out here from somewhere else. Can you somehow, in the next 3 weeks, say something to those folks?
I think the best
it's
way-
really important. I mean, it really is outrageous.
I
that
think the
someone-
best way of addressing that, and I've actually had success in doing this in the past, I had really good success last year, is just to make sure we're doing a clear communication. That one might be a little harder because I don't know the specific pilots that would do it, whereas before I kind of had a general idea of exactly who, but we could do general communications to our pilots.
That's all I ask.
Yeah, I've been building a pretty good contact list that I can kind of send out little information blasts. But that's, most people overwhelmingly, when you ask them, like, hey, this happened or that happened, they're like, oh yeah, let us know. You know, we don't want to, we're not here to make people mad. They just got to know.
I don't have a dog in that fight, but I'm just telling you because I had 2 kids that graduated there. It just was one of those things. But I know that all of St. Vrain's outdoors, and it always seems to be an issue. So I just maybe, like you said, try to reach out to the general group of folks. You can't control the guy that's flying down from Wyoming to do stuff, but the other folks could certainly make an effort. Thank you.
Councilor Hidalgo-Fearing.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I was saying is, at least it's not the trains. So,
Oh, yeah.
that would be loud. So my question actually goes back, I believe it's slide 5, in going over some of the current challenges, and the supply being one of them. Yeah, in the previous slide, you had mentioned that future grants would most likely include unleaded requirement. So then how's that going to impact people who are trying to acquire grants and,
That's
at
actually,
the airport?
I'm glad you brought that. That's actually something that I was just having a conversation with some colleagues last week about. It's like, well, everyone's talking about how they're probably going to start requiring this. So probably what you're going to see is requirements of such based on a provision of availability. So they're probably going to see like, when available and stuff like
Okay,
that.
okay.
So they're, it'll be interesting to see how they word that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll be looking at that. Thank you.
So seeing no more questions, I do want to say that Congressman Goose always has a mayor's meeting of all the mayors in his district, and there were a good majority of the mayors having conversations about the unleaded fuel in their airports. And it's a slow progress, still working its way through the Senate and Congress.
Yeah, and it's something, to keep in perspective, it's something everyone wants. I mean,
Yes.
the FAA wants it,
Everyone's working on it.
No one likes handling leaded fuel. It's something that everyone wants, so it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say congratulations on those complaints.
Yeah.
Very different than what we've had in the past. So a lot of that goes to the work of our staff as well. But you're part of staff, so thank you.
Thank you.
So now we are on B, the amendments to section 15.03.050A, airport influence overlay regarding compatible land uses within the AIO zone. Welcome, Jennifer.
Welcome. Let me. All right. Get a little situated here. Give me one moment. All right. Thank you so much, Mayor and members of the council. Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, City Planning and Development Services Department, Principal Planner. So yes, tonight we'd like to talk to you a little bit about some proposed amendments to the section of the Land Development Code, specifically 15.03.05A. That relates to the airport influence overlay. So in terms of what we're going to go over tonight, one is an overview of the current code provisions for the airport influence overlay, some of the existing conditions in the area, communications and guidance that we've had from the FAA, and some proposed amendments that staff has put together for your consideration and for feedback and direction on. So the purpose of the airport influence, the stated purpose of the airport influence overlay zone
I'm going to start calling it the AIO because it's a mouthful otherwise, is to allow the airport to serve the city's air transportation needs and protect the public investment in the airport, to minimize risk to public safety and the hazards to airport users, and also to protect property values and restrict incompatible land uses, as well as to promote appropriate land use planning and zoning in proximity to the airport. Okay, I have two computers going. That was probably a mistake. So this is the current airport influence overlay AOI map, as well as the zoning. So this section of the code regulates development within the airport influence overlay zone surrounding Vance Brand Airport. So this overlay zone is the red oval on your screen, and you'll know it's a pretty large area. So the entire AOI area is approximately 9,541 acres, or not just under 15 square miles. Of that, 9.15 square miles is located within the Longmont planning area. So a pretty substantial portion of this AIO to the north and to the west are within unincorporated Boulder County, are not within the city of Longmont's or the Longmont planning area. Currently, the code does not address specific uses. Rather, it addresses restrictions that relate to height, electrical interference, navigation hazards. The other thing to note is there are no location-specific standards currently within the AIO, such as standards that would apply only to certain parts of the overlay zone. So the other thing to note, just have this discussion on other possible overlay zones as well. It's as an overlay zone, the requirements of the underlying zoning district will apply unless otherwise specified. Airport overlay zones are, you see them wherever there's an airport. So they all have some fairly common features, but ultimately the underlying zoning applies unless there is some other specification in the overlay zone that would supersede it. So another item is abrogation easements, which basically are easements that grant rights to the airspace above a property for passage of aircraft. It's something that we typically require for developments that are in proximity to the airport, to basically, so any future purchasers would know, hey, by the way, you're near the airport, there's going to be planes going over you. So while we require these easements, it's not specifically codified within Section 15. So that's one of the other items that we would like to address through some amendments as well. So it's not codified in terms that we require them. It's also not specified exactly where in the AIO we require them. So one of the big challenges we have with this particular part of Longmont is it is one of the very few remaining parts of the city with significant vacant and developable land. We're seeing a lot of development pressure in this area, particularly the area bound by Rogers Road to the north, Nelson Road to the south, Airport Road on the west, and Hover Street on the east. This particular kind of subset of the AIO is mostly zone mixed-use employment, which does allow high-density residential as a secondary use. And I would say the vast majority of the inquiries and applications that we've seen in this general area do have a residential component or are requests for purely residential projects. So the pressures we're seeing in this area, even though it's mixed-use employment zoning, are for that secondary use of high-density residential. So this is the current zoning map for the area nearest to Vance Brand Airport. That the airport is the large blue rectangle on the map. Just want to show this to you for some context. So the green line to the left is the Longmont planning area. There we go, there's my arrow. So this green line is the Longmont planning area. This is Vance Brand Airport. You can see this area does contain a number of county enclaves as well as undeveloped tracts of land, although it's important also to note that much of this undeveloped land is designated as parks, greenways, and open space by Envision Longmont and is not developable. And much of this protected area is also within the floodplain, so it's really not developable. Dark gray areas immediately south of Vance Brand Airport are zoned for primary employment, which does not allow any residential development. And then the light gray areas southeast of the airport, this is really the area that we're really concerned with. That lighter gray is zoned mixed use employment. The white areas on the map are unincorporated Boulder County enclaves that would have, as a general rule, the same Envision Longmont designation. So, as I mentioned, this light gray area is really where we're seeing a lot of developer interest. It also happens to coincide with the runway approach path. So, just to give you some context on that. So, as a result of a proposed mixed-use development with a significant residential component in the mixed-use employment area just described, in June 2023, the FAA Denver Airport's District Office Community Planner sent a letter to the airport manager stating that it viewed the proposed development as an incompatible land use and contrary to the grant assurances with the city. The FAA did note in that letter that failure to comply with these grant assurances might result in loss of eligibility for federal grant funds at Vance Brand Airport. I will note this is the first time that staff had ever received correspondence of this nature from this particular FAA office in response to a development proposal. We do usually, for development applications near the airport and in closer proximity, we'll get something called a finding of no hazard to air navigation, which really relates to potential obstructions, so height, anything of height that could impact. But we had never received really, we hadn't received any correspondence of this nature before. So, needless to say, that prompted a fury of discussion and really forced us to take a hard look at some things and have quite a few discussions. So. Staff has met with FAA representatives on several occasions since we received this letter in an attempt to get some clarity on their expectations and how they could be balanced with, frankly, our housing needs. That was a discussion I had with the author of this letter at least once, was that, hey, look, we have this, housing is a huge priority for us in the city. We have a significant shortage of affordable units and just units in generally, and this is going to be a problem. So our goal is we're basically trying to figure out how do we address the FAA's needs while also addressing our very real housing needs as well. We did realize through this process that our overlay zone provisions in the code would likely require amendments to add more specificity because it is a pretty broad section of the code compared to other AOI code sections I've seen in other cities. Pardon me. So staff did provide, or FAA staff did provide an advisory circular with model ordinances as guidance for moving forward. This advisory circular is included as attachment 4 in your packet. This document does include a breakdown of proposed breakdown of a larger airport influence zone into smaller subzones that would relate more to proximity to the runway. And yeah, this is a guidance document. This is an advisory circular. It was interesting because we said, okay, this might be, let's see what we can do with this type of approach. And we have received feedback that, the FAA would provide a more restrictive approach than the model ordinances that they provided us would provide. But we are recommending an approach similar to that, really as a compromise that we think would help address the FAA's concerns regarding land use compatibility while also considering our very real housing needs. So with that, proposed ordinances that staff has drafted are included as attachment 1 in your packet. We would recommend amending the zoning map to identify 2 subzones nearest to the runway using criteria included in the advisory circular, and also amending the text portion of the code to identify these recommended subzones and add more specific land use restrictions. We would also recommend that the abrogation easement and additional disclosure documents for tenants be codified as part of this section. That is something we really talked about, that, in many cases, especially with the larger, with some of the higher density residential, you're going to more likely to have, and also for the commercial properties, you're going to have tenants more likely than you would owners, and they need to have the same disclosures as a property owner would, because they ultimately are the ones using the property. So these are the proposed map amendments that are proposed. So in this particular map, the green large oval is the overall existing airport influence overlay zone. Within this area, we would recommend what we internally have taken to calling the paddleboard approach, with the red line going through the airport as Zone A and the kind of orange hatched area as Zone B. So Zone A basically encompasses the runway and a trapezoidal area 1,000 feet beyond the end of the runway. And then Zone B extends an additional 4,000 feet beyond Zone A. Zone A is 450 feet wide at its widest point, and then Zone B is 1,250 feet wide at its terminus, 5,000 feet from the end of the runway. In terms of overall area, Zone A encompasses approximately 46 acres, and Zone B contains 156 acres total. And that actually is the entire, on all sides of Zone A and Zone B. So including the portion that's outside of our planning area. So regarding specific uses in the subzones, the proposed amendments would add a section on land use compatibility that identifies the location of zones A and B and establishes the following use restrictions. Within the Zone A, no development would be permitted. And then within Zone B, residential, lodging, schools, daycare centers, assembly uses, hospitals, and any other unspecified uses that may be determined to be incompatible with airport operations would be prohibited, which is we recognize a shift from the current approach that would allow high-density residential uses as a secondary use in the MUE zone. In terms of the impacts on proposed development, there would be no impact on already approved projects. Speakers earlier did make reference to the non-conforming use status. There is a section in our non-conforming use section of the Land Development Code that, and I will read that to you because it's quite clear what it says. So it's section 15.08.070B, and it states, if a non-conforming structure is damaged or destroyed by unavoidable means or cause, the structure may be restored if the restoration does not increase the degree of non-conformity and is otherwise consistent with this chapter. So there's no prohibition on non-conforming uses being rebuilt or reconstructed. They just can't be made bigger than they were before, is what it comes down to. So that section of the code is pretty explicit about that. In terms of projects that are currently under review, they would be subject to the current code, though conditions of approval could be imposed, as with any, particularly if it's a discretionary action requiring council or planning and zoning commission approval. There's always that possibility that conditions can be imposed as deemed necessary and appropriate. So with that, staff is seeking council direction on whether and how to proceed with the public process for adoption of the proposed amendments to the airport influence overlay zone. And with that, I will stand by for any questions and have other folks on hand as well, including our city attorney's office.
Okay. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just wanted to, the non-conforming uses. There have been some, I just want to hear you say it. There was, what you said was that we would permit the rebuilding or repair of a building that was a non-conforming use, as long as it wasn't expanded. But there are some other related questions that I would like to also hear affirmed. Would that building be insurable after it was rebuilt? Would an existing building that was a non-conforming use, or that became a non-conforming use that for some reason was not insured now, but didn't change, could that building be insured by the owner? What about those two questions?
So I will not pretend to speak for the vagaries of the property insurance industry. I can tell you what our code says. Eugene, do you have any thoughts on that?
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney, we could certainly look into that question. I don't have an answer for that right now. We could talk to Risk and our insurance broker and get some parameters on that.
Yeah, I think because, I think an answer must exist because the insurance industry is regulated too. You know, they're pretty, you know, sometimes they change their minds, but usually it's only in terms of rates, not in terms of what's insurable or not. So I would not want to give direction without knowing the answer to that, because there are quite a few existing developments that might be impacted by this.
And if those developers that raise those concerns can bring us specifics, that would be great, and contacts to speak to.
So we don't have to research it, the developers do.
They apparently have information that raises these concerns, so
I don't know.
please pass that on.
I have not heard that. I have heard the concern raised, but not by developers.
Or property owners?
Property owners, yeah.
Okay. We'll look into it.
Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. It seems that this item was raised by a specific development in the queue based on the letter that was presented in the packet. And as such, could be labeled as a case-by-case basis in concept, especially noting that current properties in the pipeline would fall under current code with the ability for conditions to be imposed, as they often are by planning and zoning. So what precludes us from leaving the process as is, noting that conditions can be applied if significant objections are made by the FAA?
Mayor and Council, City Attorney, once again, that is an option that exists under our current code.
And so is staff asking for a streamline so they don't have to worry about a case-by-case scenario?
Mayor and Council, I wasn't in those FAA meetings. I've talked to staff who were, and FAA's position is that residential in Zone B is an incompatible land use. And we are partners with them on the airport through our grant assurances, and are trying to find, the
Right.
sweet spot, balancing the needs of FAA and their concerns with our community needs.
So that's residential regardless of density or massing, just period. Because it seems like the concept that they're arguing is more a mass assembly than it is just people being there. Because at any given time, in a non-residential use that doesn't have hospital ramifications or daycare ramifications, what's trivializing the lives of workers in primary employment?
So the rationale that I was given was that people typically aren't sleeping in primary employment.
And I would assume that there's ultimately more air activity during the day than there is at night at a local airport. So I'm not quite sure of that justification. Just a point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So my question is, why was this not brought up by FAA in previous grant assurances? Why is it just now coming to light?
That's a question we've been asking ourselves. So we haven't really.
It doesn't make much sense at this point.
Yeah, I think part of it is, and I was in part of the conversation with the FAA, and maybe Joni can help me on this one too, because I had other meetings, so I was in and out of it. So Joni, be ready to help me. So I'm not sure why it was the first time for us, but definitely we're not the only ones that are now getting these letters. I think there's other jurisdictions that are receiving similar letters, and so I think it's a product of just where they are. But Joni, you were in longer conversations than I was.
Sure. Mayor Peck, members of council, Joni Marsh, City Manager's Office. So having been a land use planner at the City of Longmont for 23 years, I have never received a letter like this, which is what I asked them when we were on the phone. Basically, their response came down to land use compatibility is a priority, but it's your problem to solve and to maintain. We are sending this letter going forward, so you will see this letter again for this development and other developments, and we are also sending it to other communities and development projects in those communities that are adjacent to airports like Centennial, Erie, Rocky Mountain. So we certainly aren't being singled out, but I would say this is certainly a shift. Again, having worked here and received these letters for a long time, it's definitely a shift, and I think they are reacting to kind of the current climate around airport and noise and issues that they're seeing in communities, and also lawsuits that are being filed. If you're familiar with what's been filed by a couple of different parties for Rocky Mountain Airport, including Boulder County, suing them for both fuels and noise. So I think that it's accumulation of things, and so absent being able to articulate specifically what they'll send on each and every application, we're here to share with you what that looks like for us.
Okay, and going back to a little bit of what Councilor Rodriguez was hitting on, if residential is a secondary use and we go ahead and approve that, what are the chances of FAA coming back on us after that has already been built and saying, this is not working so well for us, and then taking away our ability to get grants? Is that a risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the letter, what they've essentially said in the letter is, here's this issue, you need to pay attention to it, and your airport funding could be jeopardized. Now, will they do that? We don't know. But what you're seeing in this is to the point of, yes, they can't dictate land use. What they're saying is they can utilize the power of the purse to say, if you don't do this, then we're going to restrict your funding that we send to the airport. I mean, that's essentially the risk.
Okay, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'm looking at the map, which I was very kindly had some staff FaceTime looking at the maps of the development around those other airports that Joni listed. I noticed that those airports are much more closely packed in by existing residential development than Vance Brand Airport is, which is by comparison in pretty open space. And so what I'm wondering is, the FAA, when they're talking about how we treat aviation businesses, they are really sticklers for us not discriminating against those aviation businesses. Do they have similar regulations about how they shouldn't discriminate against municipalities one over the other? Because the build out in the other municipalities that have airports that have airports in the middle of them, they've got an advantage because they built up before the FAA began this practice of sending these letters. So, I don't know how the FAA is regulated on that, but it would be worth looking into, because it does put us at a disadvantage with respect to the surrounding communities.
Mayor, if I may, the sentence that I was referring to is the last sentence of paragraph 3 in the letter that says failure to comply with federal grant assurances may, doesn't say will, may result in the FAA issuing an order terminating eligibility for grants or suspending the payments of grant funds to the Vance Brand Airport. So that's the uncertainty in this, in that they're not saying shall, they're not saying will, they're saying may, and I think that's the piece that for us got our attention pretty fast, because they are touching the federal funds that they contribute to the airport, that frankly, without those federal funds, we've got a different problem on our hands. And so that's why we're bringing this. I think what I've said to council is you have 3 choices, maybe 4 now that I've heard from Councilmember Rodriguez. 1, do nothing, leave it as it is, understand the risk associated that may come into the play if the FAA chooses not to continue funding. Option 1B is take the approach of allowing it to be as it is, understanding when you make the land use decisions on a particular project that's in that area, if you do allow it, then you're kind of triggering that issue again with the FAA in terms of potential funding. C, the paddleboard concept, and D, and we obviously didn't suggest this. I think in conversations they would love it if we didn't allow development within that dotted ring line, the larger area, of which we're like, well, that doesn't work. And so I think those are council's decisions. We can certainly get more information for you and bring it back, but I think Eugene, staff, that's kind of what we were working through.
Well, I had a second part to my question. I still have my line here. The other question that I would have is, have we spoken with those other airports and see what their reaction is? Because we understand that they got the same letter. Yes?
We think they've gotten the letter. What they've said is others have or will, or
What they said to me was they have sent the letter and that development has continued in 2 of those instances.
Interesting. I'd be really interested in hearing that, because the last question I have is, what is the primary mission of the FAA with respect to general aviation airports?
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Martin, I don't think I could opine on the FAA's thoughts on that. Certainly, we could also ask them to come to a council meeting and see if they would be game for that. I don't know the answer to that. You know, one example they gave me was they sent a Lone Tree developer next to Centennial Airport a letter because they had an engine failure that went into a single-family home near the airport. It sounded like that development continued. So those were some of the examples they provided. They didn't give me a ton of background, but those were a few that they gave. And again, we didn't spend our whole conversation on this. We had a lot of things to talk to during that meeting, so we could certainly go back to them too.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, I would like to hear what the FAA has to say. I would like to hear what the other airport's position on this is, and I would like to understand what the insurance situation is before we came to a decision. I think it's a little bit premature to make such a weighty piece of direction on what we know now. That's, you know, we're just taking polls of the council. Well, that's my conclusion on this for now.
So Jennifer, this is for you. Where is this developer that's here tonight? Where is their project?
They are currently in the review process.
Okay, so would they be under the old code?
Correct.
Okay. So this won't affect them? Or will it?
I'll defer to City Attorney May, but I think it would probably be a situation similar to Councilmember Rodriguez' statement about case-by-case conditions.
Okay.
Right, this, if we were to enact the airport or make the modifications to the airport influence zone, it'd be prospective, applying to future application.
Okay. Councilor Crest.
So referring to the FAA advisory circular, in the fourth bullet point, number 2, they're a little more strongly worded in that they say use of these standards and guidelines is mandatory for projects funded under federal grant assistance programs, including the Airport Improvement Program. See grant assurances number 34 and number 21. So they say it's mandatory in the advisory circular. And then Jennifer, in your communication, you said that this was really a compromise, that the FAA was requesting more than what you're suggesting. What more were they wanting?
I think if they had their way, there would not be any additional residential development in the larger airport influence area. I mean, it was implied that they would like to see much wider restrictions on residential uses within the airport overlay.
And the sense I'm getting is they are concerned about litigation and safety and maybe engine failures and having a safe out for pilots who run into trouble. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's a variety of concerns.
Yeah. They're not just picking on us.
No. We're not special in that regard, sounds like.
Okay.
So do we, from councilors, do you have any recommendations on what staff has proposed for actions? I think Councilor Martin basically says put everything on hold until she gets answers to the questions she asked. Councilor Rodriguez, is that where you are as well, or?
It's not that I have a lot of questions per se. I have a lot of arguments, I guess, to make. For instance, who's suing the FAA? They're suing the airports, aren't they? Whoever these lawsuits are against Rocky Mountain Airport, they're not City of Boulder versus FAA. So why is it the FAA's business on whether a municipality incurs lawsuits? I'm just curious. I mean, that's our business, of course, but how is it the FAA's business? And that's my question.
So I think we can go back to, so obviously, if you remember when we talked about noise and other issues at the airports, the minute a plane, the wheels go off the runway, that plane is under the control and jurisdiction of the Federal Aviation Administration. And so I think that's part of what's in the equation. I think it's hard to answer that right now, but I mean, we can get that information, but I really think it is tied to their oversight. I mean, we heard it a lot when it came to noise, is you don't control that. We control that. And so that's inherently, I think, the tension, you know, that we've seen in going through that process.
Is Zone B, oh, this is my ignorance of air flight. Is Zone B where an airplane starts losing altitude to come in and land? Is that part of it? Not losing altitude.
It's referred to as generally the approach zone.
Approach, yeah, but
That's you, Levi.
because I don't understand the reasoning for that.
Let the technical expert here.
I can speak a little bit about that. So if you can see the map that they put up, they call it the paddle board.
Right.
And on either end of that map are the paddles to the paddle, if you will. So those two paddles would be either the approach or the departure leg. So that's where, with any object that's in the air, it must make a transition from, you know, the sky to the ground. So that's where it's getting very close. Either it's coming away from the land or it's getting very close to the ground. So, for example, directly across the street from Airport Road, planes might be 50 feet above the ground,
Right.
coming in over that field.
So we have one counselor who has arguments, one counselor who has questions and wants to table. Any other input on what action? Counselor Hidalgo Faring.
You know, thank you, Mayor. As I was reading the packet, the letter, you know, it didn't sit right with me. It just feels like coercion. And, and, you know, this is our town. We make these land code, we build our ordinances, we have our priorities and objectives, and then here comes this agency that says you will not. So, you know, that's my personal opinion. It doesn't sit right with me. So I'm having a really hard time. I think we do need some questions answered. And, you know, what is the premise? What is it all having to do with litigation? I mean, that's kind of the sense I'm coming from. It's this fear of litigation. So they've gone to another extreme. But they don't live here. We do. So I just, you know, I like the idea of, well, you know, there's some hope in knowing that, you know, current things that are in the pipeline will still be, we'll be able to get those through, and we'll push really hard to make sure that happens. But yeah, I'm not ready to move forward on this right now. Okay, sorry.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I agree with Councilmember Martin. I think get the questions answered. I think the community would feel better about that, and then in the end here, we can decide, you know, how hard we're going to argue this with them. But you know, we did see earlier tonight a $750,000 you know, grant, and the last thing we want to do is jeopardize opportunities like that. But you know, maybe that's what we have to do. So that's my opinion.
Okay, another wait. Councilor Christ. Oh, turn you on.
More information is always helpful, so I'll concur with waiting.
Okay. Okay, Counselor Yarborough agrees. Jennifer, so you kind of mentioned that, or was it Joni? I can't remember. To have FAA come and answer our questions?
Invite them.
Yeah, invite them. Why not? Some of the ones that you didn't have answers, you didn't want to opine on them. So
We can always extend the invitation.
please do. So it is not a done deal. And I'm glad we have more questions that aren't just rubber stamping something. So with that, I guess we are finished. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation and for your work. I know it's not easy working with another governmental agency.
Thank you.
So we are done with our items. Councilor McCoy.
No, I was just waiting for mayor and council comments.
We are now at mayor and council comments.
So last night I attended Silver Creek Leadership Academy Evening of Excellence, and I wanted to say how proud I was of the students and to thank the class of 2014 who emceed this wonderful event. And I also wanted to thank the mentors that helped the students, successfully complete their projects, and the teachers that were also in some cases mentors, but also support to them, and especially Carrie Adams and Principal Eric Finnestead for a job well done. It was definitely having my oldest daughter having gone through that and program, the way they held the whole ceremony was very interesting, and I think a very it's my electric personality. I'll keep my day job. Okay. Right. So, so anyhow, wanted to just thank them for a job well done. Thank you.
Any other comments from councilors? Well, I'll go first to city attorney because we lost our city manager.
No comments, Mayor?
Okay. City manager, no comments. Can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are
I was
adjourned.
going to say something and then Councilmember McCoy's electric personality.